Welcome to This Explainer. If you're joining me today, chances are you know this exact feeling. You've got this massive, wildly ambitious project. It's a brilliant idea you really want to bring to life, but the sheer, overwhelming scale of it is literally causing creative paralysis. You just freeze up. You know that crushing pressure to get it exactly right on the very first try? It's paralyzing. Well, today, we are going to completely shatter that paralysis. We're diving into some incredible insights from Peter Sims's research on the strategy of little bets. And as you'll see, taking consistent, small actions is absolutely the ultimate antidote to creative stagnation.
Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to honestly ask yourself, how do geniuses actually create? Do masters of their craft, like a world-famous comedian or some tech billionaire, do they simply pull fully formed, absolutely perfect ideas right out of thin air? We kind of have this romanticized vision, right? This idea that true creators just wake up one morning with a flawless blueprint already mapped out in their heads. But the reality of how breakthroughs actually happen is way different and honestly a whole lot messier. There's a quote that brilliantly illustrates this truth. Kevin Ashton points out, "Nothing good is created the first time. Creators must be willing to fail and repeat until they find the steps that arrives." We've got to completely shatter this myth of overnight success. Great ideas do not come to you fully formed. They require a real, gritty willingness to fail, to iterate, and to actively build that idea from the ground up.
So here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll start with high-stakes paralysis. Then we'll define little bets, compare two innovator types, break down the six-step method, and finally, lock in the experimental mindset.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, high-stakes paralysis and the problem with perfectionism. When we tie all our hopes and dreams to one massive, flawless launch, we are basically navigating in the dark while betting the entire house. That fear of high-stakes failure, it leads directly to creative stagnation. It makes our thinking super insular, and we end up just waiting around for the perfect plan instead of taking action. But let's look at a prime example of someone who actively avoids this trap. Think about Chris Rock, massively successful comedian, right? You'd assume developing a routine is a total cinch for him by now. No way. People are usually shocked to learn that Rock spends 6 to 12 months testing his material before he ever takes it to a large audience. He deliberately heads over to this small comedy club in New Jersey called the Stress Factory to test out his jokes. He gets up there, fully willing to literally bomb and fail night after night in front of a tiny room of superfans just to figure out what actually works. He mitigates the huge risk of high-stakes failure later by completely embracing small-scale failure right now.
Moving right along to Section 2, defining little bets and the iterative solution. So what exactly are little bets? Basically, they're concrete actions you take to discover, test, and develop ideas that are both achievable and affordable. The absolute crucial point here is that these bets are the key to tackling massive, open-ended problems without needing that perfect plan up front. They are creative possibilities that you iterate and refine over time. You're essentially failing fast to learn fast, right? You adapt your approach as you go rather than stubbornly sticking to a plan that might be totally blind to reality. That brings us to Section 3, 2 innovator types. Conceptual versus experimental. Think of it like this. First, you've got conceptual innovators. These are those really rare creators who just pursue bold ideas and often hit their massive breakthroughs early in life. Think of a genius like Mozart. But then, in stark contrast, you have experimental innovators. And honestly, this is where the vast majority of creators actually fall. This process is gritty. It relies heavily on iterative, trial-and-error approaches to eventually build up to those breakthroughs. Think Chris Rock or Jeff Bezos. Listen, if your creative process feels messy and seems to require constant, annoying tweaking, let this validate your experience. You aren't doing it wrong. You're just an experimental innovator.
Let's put this into practice with Section 4, the 6-step method for navigating uncertainty. Let's move to the practical stuff and see how this builds your ultimate toolkit. Step 1 is experiment. You gotta learn by doing and develop prototypes just to gather insights. Step 2 is play. Create a really low-pressure, almost improvisational environment so you don't judge yourself too early. Step 3 is immerse. Get out there in the real world to uncover deeper human motivations from the ground up. Step 4 is define. Use those newly found insights to pinpoint specific problems. It's exactly what the Google founders did when they defined global search by looking at library algorithms. Step 5 is reorient. Pivot flexibly whenever you hit a small win. And finally, Step 6 is iterate. Repeat, refine, and test frequently. Now, as you work through those 6 steps, you have to make a really vital psychological pivot. Instead of constantly asking yourself, what will I gain? You need to start asking, what will I lose? Now, why does that matter? Well, when you only obsess over what you can gain, your focus becomes dangerously narrow, and you miss out on hidden opportunities. Human beings inherently dread losing what they already have. It's a massive, hardwired motivating factor. When you flip the script and focus on what you'll lose if you fail to act or if you just stagnate, you actually end up working harder. It completely prevents insular thinking and keeps you way more open to trying a variety of new, out-of-the-box approaches. Which leads perfectly into our final section, Section 5, the experimental mindset and reframing failure.
10,000. I want you to think about that number for a second. That is the number of unsuccessful attempts Thomas Edison made while trying to invent the light bulb. 10,000! But here's the kicker. Edison didn't view these as failures. To him, every single one of those unsuccessful attempts was just the necessary process of eliminating what didn't work. It was pure, unfiltered feedback. When you're making little bets, mistakes and failures aren't roadblocks. They're simply opportunities to learn and gather critical data.
To do this, we also need to distinguish between 2 completely different types of perfectionism. Healthy perfectionism acknowledges that, hey, absolute perfection just doesn't exist. These folks strive for excellence, they're driven by their own personal values, and crucially, they actually allow for a messy, iterative process. Unhealthy perfectionism, on the other hand, that is entirely driven by a desperate need for external approval. These individuals are constantly terrified of making mistakes. They fixate on past performance, and ultimately, this mindset just completely paralyzes the creative process. So the real antidote to that toxic, unhealthy perfectionism is adopting a growth mindset. The absolute most successful creators actively stretch themselves. They know for a fact that intelligence and abilities are not fixed traits. They grow and expand with practice. By viewing every single setback purely as an opportunity to learn, they take their ego right out of the equation. And that's exactly what allows them to keep making those vital little bets. All right, to summarize how you can start putting all of this into action today, let's hit these final takeaways. First up, foster a playful, improvisational atmosphere. This is going to inspire open experimentation without the pressure. Second, participate in active discovery by exploring hidden insights from the bottom up. Third, try to learn a little bit from a lot of different people. Opening yourself up to extremely diverse perspectives is the quickest way to shatter insular thinking. And finally, seek out your active users and your superfans for early feedback on your work in progress, just like Chris Rock's sweating it out at that small comedy club. I want to leave you with this one final, provocative question to wrap up our explainer today. Take a good look at your biggest, most overwhelming project, the one that's currently giving you high-stakes paralysis. Don't try to solve the whole thing right now. Instead, ask yourself, what is the absolutely smallest, most affordable, achievable bet I can make today just to test one single assumption? Go make that bet, embrace the messy feedback, and watch your breakthrough finally begin to emerge.